Hi, my name is Livette Lavoy, and I will be presenting on overcoming diversity barriers in a mentoring partnership. Altruism has been negatively associated with relationship efficacy on the basis that wanting to give something back is more about the needs of the mentor than those of the mentee. As a mentee, it does not hurt my feelings if someone acknowledges the generational or racial differences between us. In some ways, I like those relationships better. It makes me feel more comfortable when I'm not dancing around the issues in some artificial way. What is uncomfortable for me is when we have to pretend that there's no difference. Here are my two recommendations for overcoming diversity barriers in a mentoring partnership. First, it is important for mentors to understand generational differences. Mentors must be mindful when working across generational cohorts, as older generations can unveil similar attitudes and behaviors among mentees who experience world events at the same life stage as their cohorts, and younger generations have often led older Americans in their adoption and use of technology. And this is largely holds true today. Baby boomers were shaped by World War II optimism, the Cold War, and the hippie movement. They are the biggest consumers of traditional media like television, radio, magazines, and newspapers. Generation X were shaped by the end of the Cold War, the rise of personal computing, and feeling lost between two huge generations. They still read newspapers, magazines, listen to the radio, and watch TV. Generation Y or millennials were shaped by the Great Recession, the technological explosion of the internet and social media, and 911. 95% still watch TV, but Netflix edges out traditional cable as the preferred provider. Cord cutting in favor of streaming services is the popular choice for millennials. This generation is extremely comfortable with mobile devices. Generation Z was shaped by smartphones, social media, never knowing a country, not a war, and seeing the financial struggles of their parents. The average received their first mobile at possibly 10 years of age. Many of them grew up playing with their parents' mobile phones or tablets. They have grown up in a hyper connected world, and the smartphones is their preferred method of communication. Understanding your mentee's generation can also be one way of addressing differences in sex, race, ethnicity, or background. For instance, women may prefer a female mentor to discuss work life balance and particular challenges that women face in academic and workplace. The most effective generational gap mentoring relationships strategies are establish confidence by beginning to make efforts to learn about each other, identify common interests and values, be clear about needs and expectations, and avoid stereotypes and untested assumptions. Secondly, the skills of diversity dialogue are not inherently easy. Therefore, the mentor might need to be supported with opportunities for learning how to have a productive and respectful conversation across the barriers of difference. Also, educating and supporting mentees in the skills of managing differences in dialogue is essential. Cultural difference might affect the way that your mentee perceives the messages. There may also be some preconceived power issues, like, for example, gender, race, socioeconomic differences that can affect the ability of meaningful dialogue between mentor and mentee. A recent study, Norton 2006, found that the more people that profess to be colorblind, the more the communication with people of different color becomes. Cross-gender mentorship relationships that are also cross-cultural have additional dimensions of racial taboos, which exist as a result of the intersection of race and gender dynamics. According to Thomas, racial taboos are the non-discussed connotations related to historical relationships between Black women and white men, and white women and Black men. Racial taboos can act as barriers to establishing an effective cross cultural mentoring relationship. Mentors do not need to have the same cultural or social background as their mentees, but they must pay close attention to the implication of the differences. Mentors must maintain a dual perspective in which they see the mentee as an individual as well as part of a larger social context. Mentors must be attuned to a mentee's gender, race, ethnicity, or cultural background. Power is so historically ingrained in certain societal and structural positions that it often goes unrecognized. Mentoring partners must distinguish appropriate positional power from social power ascribed by gender and race. Together, the pair can ensure that the illegitimate aspects of power based on socialization, stereotypes, and attributions do not act as a barrier. For the relationship to be maintained at a professional level, it's important that boundaries be discussed, established, and respected from the beginning. Perceived risks of sexual involvement and concerns about public image might inhibit a mentoring relationship. At the same time, keep in mind that should a sexual harassment claim arise, the assumption is that a consensual relationship is not possible when there is power differential in the professional relationship. So this is a note for the mentors. Some strategies that can be useful in terms of dealing with diverse dialogue include build agreements that allow mutual effect about the impact of language. Agree with your mentee that you expect them to tell you if you appear to be prejudiced or using language that has potential to offend them. Develop greater awareness of your own and other people's reactions to language. Body language is an important clue. In most cultures, avoidance of eye contact is an indicator of emotional discomfort, for example. Recognize and respond appropriately to slips ups of your making. Admit it yourself. If relevant, admit it to the other person as well. It's okay to say, I'm really surprised at myself. I do apologize. I think I need to reflect on this. Talk it through with someone whose wisdom you trust. Mentoring diversity should provide a safe environment. Research demonstrates that we all harbor unconscious biases, especially in the provision of services. Consequently, in order to avoid judgment and stereotyping, we must consciously be aware of our own biases and deliberately work through debunking this often. Mentor and mentees alike can start the journey of debunking your biases visiting www.implicit.harvard.edu/implicit/. Project Implicit is a Harvard-based continuing exploration of the hidden biases that people carry with them. The dimensions of our identities include not only ascribed to ethnicity and race, but includes age, ability, religion, gender, sexuality, family status, socioeconomic status, education level, interests, and hobbies. Reflecting on how complex we are as individuals and how equally complex other people are, it is clear that it can be challenging to interact effectively with others. It is important to recognize when working with your mentees that are different from us, that both are equally diverse, and the interaction is affected not only by what the other person brings to the interaction, but by what we bring to the interaction as well. Therefore, it is important to take in consideration the intersection of complex identities of all involved. We should be cautious of thinking of our identity as normal or as a reference point for neutral. There's no neutral, there's no default. Thanks for watching.